come back to you. Now, strong condemnation has been issued by China and Russia at the UN Security Council following the US military operation in Venezuela. The US action, which resulted in the detention of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, has been condemned by China and Russia as the violation of Venezuela's sovereignty and of international law. Meanwhile, China has called for the immediate release of Maduro and his wife, urging Washington to respect international law, cease coercive actions, and resolve disputes through dialogue, whereas Russia has warned the operation marks a dangerous return to lawlessness and called the assault an act of armed aggression aimed at controlling Venezuela's resources. Both countries have emphasized that conflicts must be addressed through diplomatic means and that unilateral military actions threaten peace and stability across Latin America and the Caribbean. Let's listen in.
Для преступления, цинично совершенного Соединенными Штатами в Каракасе, нет и не может быть никаких оправданий. Решительно осуждаем акт вооруженной агрессии Соединенных Штатов против Венесуэлы в нарушение всех международно-правовых норм. В связи с подтвержденными сведениями о нахождении похищенного президента Венесуэлы Николаса Мадуро и его супруги в США, а с сегодняшнего дня, как мы знаем, в Нью-Йорке, призываем американское руководство немедленно освободить законно избранного президента независимого государства и его супругу. Поэтому невнятное бормотание и попытки уйти от принципиальных оценок со стороны тех, кто в иных ситуациях с пеной у рта требовал от других соблюдения устава ООН, сегодня выглядит особенно лицемерным и неуместным.
中方对美方的单边非法霸凌行径深表震惊，予以强烈谴责。我们呼吁美方确保马杜罗总统和夫人的人身安全，将他们立即释放。我们支持安理会履行维护国际和平与安全的首要责任，支持联合国秘书长、地区国家和组织一切有助于推动对话和局势降级的努力。
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Dr. Asta Chadha from Kyoto, Japan. Thank you very much, Dr. Chadha, for staying with us. You know, as you just highlighted what the scenarios that could take place, but no matter what, U.S. is unlikely to roll back their stance and also what they have done. So what impact could this strong opposition from China and Russia have on U.S. and also the Security Council's unity and UN's ability to manage the situation and also escalation?
Well, I mean, interesting times, isn't it,
Yes.
to see countries like China and Russia, reiterating that we need to safeguard international law and rule-based international order. I
Yes.
mean, put me in a bit of a surprise when I heard those statements, but not, I mean, really, if I look down to their primary concerns and their own strategic interests, it doesn't look that surprising to me. And the reason for that, I'll give you several. One, I mean, United Nations as an international platform or UN Security Council has consistently, persistently failed to deter any conflict. And UN does remain a good consultative mechanism, does remain a good platform to raise concerns, but not enough to solve anything or even bring parties to the negotiating table. So I do not see only the fact that these countries are raising this issue at UN Security Council and trying to show some solidarity. I do not think that being able to translate into any action or any responsible sort of accountable sort of response from United States. It's very unlikely. And also because US along with China and Russia are all three veto powers there in the United Nations. So it's very unlikely again. I mean, who is going to vote against who for what? And that brings me to, the focus on why is it that China and Russia are so concerned about the US actions, right? I mean, China's primary concern is very, very clear. They are looking at this conflict as, I mean, their response was though very formal and principled. They're looking at this U.S. operation as a blatant use of force. They're looking at it as a U.S. hegemonic act. They are reiterating the fact that U.S. seems to have renewed the Monroe Doctrine. They are talking about how can U.S. ever be the guarantor of UN Charter if U.S. continues to flout the basic rules. But brings into question again that China is trying to pit this image of the United States against its own principle of non-interference. But we need to really look beyond the words and see when China, has a certain stance and show of power in South China Sea or East China Sea. Is that not a show of? Is that a show of non-interference? Really, what's happening in Taiwan? Do we really count that as a show of non-interference or as the behavior of a good neighbor? Either. So that's for China. For Russia, Russia's concerns are very, very different. When it comes to Venezuela, Russia saw Venezuela as one of those strategic partners wherein Russia did have some sort of an influence, because in the wider Latin America it doesn't seem that way anymore. For Russia, it's a loss of a key military ally, it's a loss of a key strategic partner in the Western Hemisphere, and its partners in the Western Hemisphere have been lessening even more so since the Ukraine conflict. So
Yes.
Russia's rhetoric on US use of force is very pointed towards the fact that Maduro and his wife were kidnapped. And he's trying to equate, they're trying to equate that with the idea of modern day piracy or neo-colonialism, but they don't seem to really be addressing the fact that, US and international law are somewhere not on the same page, because then Russia would have to answer to what its own actions are in Ukraine when it comes to international law. So I'm seeing both China and Russia in this case being on the same page when it comes to condemning US operation in Venezuela, but for very different reasons and with very different words.
Yeah. Thank you for highlighting that. Indeed interesting timing now that we live in. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Asta Chadha for joining us today and sharing that